Ready, set, go, man, go. I gotta get that I love, so I'm ready. Ready, ready, tell 'em ready. Ready, ready, tell 'em ready. Ready, ready, tell 'em ready, ready, ready to rock and roll on. Flat top, pants, say, jungly dog. Ready for the gym, do the soccer ball. Jump, ready, jump, the cats go wild. Me, ready, see my deeds, Chris, I'm ready. Woo, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready, ready, ready to rock and roll on. Flat top, pants, say, jungly dog. They head for the gym, do the soccer ball. Jump, ready, jump, the cats go wild. Me, ready, see my deeds, Chris, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready, ready to rock and roll.
Hi, and just a slight variation on today's show. Welcome to Where It Was At. We're going to use the television medium like a time machine and take you back about 10 or 12 years to have a look at rock and roll. With one of the most nostalgic people, I guess, for a lot of people, the guy who's rocked the hardest and heaviest around 56 and 7, Little Richard.
They call me the Bronze Liberace.
Bull feathers.
I didn't know that. Is it possible to be nostalgic about rock and roll? One of our columnist friends in town, Lauren Parton, asked us this. And we think it is, and we're going to take you back in time. For instance, do you remember Bill Haley and the Comets and Rock Around the Clock?
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock around the clock tonight.
I have with me as my guest in the studio today a personal friend of mine, and I must admit that once upon a time when I was about 11 to 16, I was a fan of his, and many people were on the West Coast. The top rock and roll disc jockey, in fact, the first rock and roll disc jockey on the West Coast of Canada, and I know you all know him, Red Robinson.
And it's amazing, I don't even look like Methuselah. Talking about Bill Haley, you know, and this particular show, Fred, without Bill, there never would have been rock and roll. Or it might have evolved, but in a different way. He had a group called Bill Haley and the Saddlemen, and he is the granddaddy of rock and roll. He still goes around the world making tours, and there was a slight time in England when there was a reoccurrence of the rock era. Bill Haley, Rock Around the Clock, it made it all happen.
Rock Around the Clock, when did you first release that?
Well, it was recorded. There's quite a story to that, Bill. I'll make it real quick for you. A fellow wrote it for me in 1952, but I couldn't get any recording company to record it, and I carried it with me for 2 years. But finally, in 1954, we recorded it for Decca Records in New York.
Oftentimes, Red Robinson and I have sat around your living room looking at your scrapbook, and we're going to share that with you this afternoon. One of the things that, one of the many firsts that Red has in the scrapbook is that you were the first guy to play Elvis Presley on the West Coast.
That's right. Matter of fact, at the time, I thought Elvis was a country singer, and I had a terrific argument with the local RCA Victor promotion guy, and I said, I'm not going to play it because he's a country singer. He said, play it and I'll answer the phones. And so we played Elvis's record, and matter of fact, I sent a telegram to the factory back in Toronto because overnight he, of course, became an instant success.
And you emceed the first Elvis Presley show in town here.
Well, it's the only one, of course, the only tour he ever took, and was in Vancouver late August about the 22nd, 1957. And did, I think, Ottawa and Toronto, a couple areas in Canada, and, of course, all of the United States. He's quite a guy. He's just, you know, a down-to-earth a person, just like anyone you'd meet anywhere. He's not an intellectual guy by any stretch of the imagination, but a nice person, I thought.
That may be a saving grace for Elvis, not being an intellectual.
Right, he was
stormed through it all.
He was in town many hours, and I got to know him as well as you can, an entertainer, and he was a very nice guy.
We'll be back to have a closer look at our nostalgia of rock and roll in just a very few minutes. We went down to Izzy's Supper Club here in Vancouver, and not under the best of circumstances, shot this film of Little Richard.
Wop, bop, a loom, bop, a lop, bop, bop, to the fruit, oh, to the fruit, woo, to the fruit, oh, to the fruit, oh, to the fruit, oh, wop, bop, a loom, bop, a lop, bop, bop, got a gal named Sue. She knows just what to do, woo, got a gal named Sue. She knows just what to do. Said she knows how to love me, yes indeed. Boy, you don't know what she's doing to me. To the fruit, oh, to the fruit, woo, to the fruit, oh, to the fruit, oh, to the fruit, oh, wop, bop, a loom, bop, a lop, bop, bop, got a gal named Dave. She almost drives me crazy. Got a gal named Dave. She almost drives me crazy. Said she knows how to love me. Yes, indeed. Boy, you don't know what she's doing to me. To the fruit, oh, to the fruit, woo, to the fruit, oh, to the fruit, oh, to the fruit, oh, yes indeed. Boy, you don't know what you're doing to me. Tutti frutti, oh, tutti frutti, woo, tutti frutti, oh, tutti frutti, oh, tutti frutti, oh, womp bam baloo bam boom.
Little Richard, welcome to Where It's At.
Glad to be.
Yeah, good to have you. That was the one that started it all, wasn't it? Tutti Frutti?
Oh, yes. That was the one that kicked the beauty off to the world, the bronze Liberace.
Where were you before you happened in
Well,
1956?
I was living in a little town, Macon, Georgia. You know, Otis Reddings is from there. Also James Brown, but I was the best looking one to leave. So I left first.
Weren't you working in a Greyhound bus station or something?
I was washing dishes at the bus station, the pots and the pans. And can't you imagine a beautiful man like me washing pots and pans? So finally one day they discovered that I was the bronze Liberace and took me out of there.
How'd that happen anyway?
Well, back there, you know, I used to get so mad washing all of these pots and pans back there, just washing dishes with all of this beauty for it. And I got tired one day, and the man brought all of his pots and pans, and I just said, wop, babaloo, mama, bam, boom! My mind, he took the pots out, and I made a hit record.
And that was the million seller Tutti Frutti,
A
which
million seller.
led to other great hits.
Long,
Salad.
tall Sally, good golly, Miss Molly, rip it up, ready, Teddy, the girl can't help it, she's got it, Miss Ann, and ooh-wee.
Where's the place that was wildest in all your years?
England. Oh, Fred, go to England. You've been there, but go again. There is no place like England. Woo-wee. I had a good time in England. Though they rocked all day and all night, and when they saw me when I got off the plane, they said, woo, here it is. For beautiful little Richard. And I just got off, and they said, make one note. I said, woo, have a ball right there in England. I wanted to say something, Fred. My band and I, a lot of people ask the question, say, how long have you been singing? You know, we've been singing for a long time. You know, my first hit record came out in 1956, and Grady Gaines, outstanding rocker here, was one of the original saxophone players in my group with me that made all the movies with me and traveled the world with me. He's the only original person that is left in my band that made all the records with me, like Tutti Frutti, Long Tall Sally, Good Golly, Miss Molly. And Boogie is known for house rock. He used to be with bands like Count Basie and Chick Webb and all of those people, but he's with us now. But he was big even then, but he was a kid then. He started playing at the age of 9. He's 27 now, but he's a fantastic saxophone player. And the drummer from New Orleans used to be down with Louis Armstrong and all those cats. He's an outstanding drummer. And Eddie, he's the one that we call the Bronze Tiny Tim from Mississippi. He's an outstanding bass player. And this young man here, Mr. Tony Matthews, he's the writer of my latest record that we believe that's going to be a big record called Can I Count on You from Oklahoma. A fantastic songwriter and a great guitar player. And I am, without any doubt,
What was you going to do, Lucille?
I would like to do Lucille, one of my favorite tunes that I've
Suck it
written.
to him.
My.
Lucille, oh, won't you dance to this wind? Lucille, oh, won't you dance to this wind? You ain't only man, but I love to see. Lucille, please come back where she belongs. Woo, yeah, please come back where she belongs. I'm thinking to you, baby, please don't leave me alone. I woke up this morning, Lucy was not in sight. I am my friend, but all that little fight. Lucy, baby, satisfy my heart. I play my with you, baby. It is such a wonderful song. my sight. I had my breath about all this little stuff. Lucille, baby, satisfy my heart. I play my with baby, gave it such a wonderful start. God, Lucille, please come back, my dear Lord. Woo, yeah, please come back, my dear Lord. Now, be good to you, baby. Please don't leave me alone, yeah.
Back to where it was at in 2 minutes. Red, what were the ingredients, as far as you can see, that made up rock and roll?
Two basic ingredients, Fred, you know that. Rhythm and blues and country and western. I think the people that, personified country and western were people like Buddy Knox, Jimmy Bowen, Eddie Cochran, Donnie Brooks, Johnny and Dorsey Burnett, Roy Orbison, and the Everly Brothers.
At the time we were doing it, it made us feel a little bit of an outcast in school.
Ashamed is what he means. I was always trying to hide it. I never, because everybody said, country music, they put you down for it, and you when you're growing up, you want to fit. You don't want to be an outsider. And so I never dug it much.
They didn't know what
that
a guitar was then.
No, I thought it was a banjo.
They thought it was a banjo.
When the English explosion happened, or when the Beatles started to happen, people were talking about mods and rockers.
Right.
And I think there were mods and rockers in the early 1950s in rock and roll.
Everybody had their idols, of course. There was Elvis and Marlon Brando on one side, and the other side in the music world, people like Robin Luke, Frankie Avalon, Connie Francis, Bobby Darin, and Pat Boone, of course.
When I started out singing, I was singing strictly rock and roll, and a lot of people forget that. They think of me in association with songs like April Love and Friendly Persuasion and Love Letters in the Sand, which were pretty ballads. But I started out singing, one heart's not enough, baby. Two hearts will make you feel crazy, And then there was Ain't That a Shame, a rock and roll song, Long Tall Sally, and Tutti Frutti, which were both Little Richard songs. And they were, just out and out rock and roll.
One of the things that I remember most clearly about the era was the fads we all went through, because there was a new one every week, and I guess as a disc jockey, you must be able to remember.
That's true. Pat Boone, for instance, wore white buck shoes, and,
I had a pair of white bucks.
Yeah, you looked great. You used to have, another thing was to hold your collar up like this and sort of, have your
and a duck
shirt open.
Haircut.
Yeah, right down to here. And, what hula hoops. I remember you, with a hula hoop, you were fabulous. I think you won a competition.
Do you remember the Davy Crockett hat?
Yeah.
So I just bought a little stupid-looking coonskin cap, and I had a little plastic rifle, and I went walking around the stage singing, Davy, Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. And it sort of left the adults cold.
Red, though, seriously, there were some really bad songs out then. The lyrics. Do you remember some of the really
Who could make
ones?
them out?
Well, Tell Laura I Love Her. Do you remember that one?
Along Came Jones and and all that stuff the Coasters did. You had remember the great protest song?
Oh, there was a terrific protest song of that era. And Red and I would like to do a few of the lyrics for you now. It's by Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers.
We haven't practiced, but let's go.
Ooly papa cow, cow, ooly papa cow, papa. Here's Cornell Gunther of the Coasters to introduce Little Richard. Papa cow.
Oh, wow. Well, going back to Little Richard again.
And they call me the Burns Liberace.
Hotel and Mary, Bonnie the John, Big and Miss Bunny, have a lot of fun all day. Woo, baby, have me some fun tonight. Yeah, well, on John Tennessee, this week's got everything that Uncle John did all day. Woo, baby, have me some fun tonight. Yeah, well, it's all of a John Big Boy outside. Some man coming in the double canal all day. Woo, baby, what you want me to do. You got me running, you got me hiding, you got me run high, run any way you want it, let it roll. Ooh, let it roll. You got me doing what you want, baby, what you want me to do. I'm going up, I'm going down, I'm going up, down, down, up, any way you want it, let it roll. Ooh, let it roll. You got me doing what you want, baby, what you want me to do.
You've been watching Little Richard at the international famous Izzy's Supper Club here in Vancouver. The King, long live the King, and thank you, Richard. It's been a pleasure to have you where it's at.
Fred, I was glad to come in.
We can follow it probably with the number.
Oh, yes,
and
with
many
a good
thanks.
number. Good golly, Miss Marley. Thank you, Fred. Bye-bye-bye.
Good golly, Miss Marley, sure like the ball. Good golly, Miss Marley, you sure like the ball. Oh, when you're rocking and rolling, I can hear your mama call. Woo, golly, Miss Marley, you sure like the ball. Good golly, Miss Marley, you sure like the ball. Oh, when you're rocking and rolling, I can hear your mama call. From the early, early morning to the early, early night, with a comet Molly rocking at the house of blue light. Good God, I miss Molly. Woo, so like the ball. Oh, when you're rocking and rolling, I can hear your mama call.
Red Robinson and I will be right back in 1 minute. Well, we've had a look at the country-oriented rock artists. We established that rock and roll is basically country and R&B combined. So what about the R&B people?
You can't forget them, Fred. Matter of fact, most of them have, longer lasting power, if you want to put it that way, than a lot of the other people we feature today. People like Ray Charles and Otis Redding and, Bill Doggett, James Brown, Fats Domino, of course, who sold 25 million records. How could you possibly forget Fats?
Right, and Chubby Checker, who had no soul, but was...
But he was
kind of interesting.
Yeah, he was an interesting
Red,
guy.
there's a significant thing, I think, that happened during the rock era. People said, well, this isn't going to last. You know, you can probably remember your parents saying that if you're in your teens now. But it did last,
Right.
and it created a whole new scene, didn't it?
I think the scene was this, if you were to, do a composite of it, is that never in history has the emphasis been so much on youth. And the music paved the way So that, you know, people 45 years of age drive a small, you know, Detroit car, a Mustang or whatever, because it's the thing to be young. And I think this pointed the way to the youth syndrome, the emphasis on being young.
Right. Ad agencies were all of a sudden beamed in on the youth.
Well, they segregated society. You now have a teenage group. You never had that in history before.
Yeah, right. I wanted to just thank you, Red, for being with us, and I hope you've enjoyed the show out there, and I hope that you, if you have enjoyed, will write in and tell us about it, because we'd really like to do it again. And while you're writing, I want to remind you to write to our Pop Poll contest, and send your list of favorite artists to Where It's At, CBC TV, 1200 West Georgia Street, Vancouver 5, BC. Okay, that's Where It's At, CBC TV, 1200 West Georgia Street, Vancouver 5, BC. We wish you luck and we hope you win. And Red, thank you very kindly.
Thanks for asking me.
You are one of the few guys who could have shared these memories with us.
I'd like to do it again sometime.
Your scrapbook and the whole thing. I hope we can.
Yeah.
I think we can, too. We'll leave the final word with Little Richard.
They call me the Bronze Liberace. They done with all they had for the gym to the side down ball. The jumps really jump, but the cats go on. Who's really see my dear, the great star,